This meeting with the Audit and Risk Committee begin by acknowledging that we meet on the land of the Gun people and we respect that people's spiritual connection with their land. I'm also going to say that this is a public meeting which will be recorded and published on the Council's website approximately 48 hours after its conclusion and will remain on the website. Audio and vision of any persons making deputation or vision of persons present in the gallery will be captured on this recording. Right. Okay. Conscious of some people in the gallery I've never met. My name is Tim O'Rourke anyway. You haven't missed anything. Yeah, so let's begin. So the first agenda item is reports of officers, item 2.1. And I just remind the members of the recommendations. And perhaps I could just take this opportunity to seek a clarification that I foreshadowed earlier today. The recommendations are that the committee review and provide feedback on the draft budget documents as follows, and that lists 4 documents which have been forwarded to us. It doesn't list the summary, which to my mind is quite an important document. That then follows. So the document with the board paper that follows. When I say summary, I mean the whole board paper. So are we able to comment on the board paper? Oh, hi, Paula.
You're talking about item 2.2.
2.1.
Through the chair, I'm happy to address this one in the first instance. I think as far as the report itself, any recommendation or plural passed by the committee this afternoon can absolutely make reference or make comment on the report itself.
Okay,
which is common practice.
That's fine. So the next step is to throw it open for discussion. And I think it's important that we be able to have a free, wide-ranging discussion. These are important documents, and we're here to assist Council's consideration of those documents. So I think it's important that people, in the past, we've had this division between where you can ask questions and where you can have discussion and so on. And I think we would be better served by being able to have a freer discussion than that. First of all, is there any objection to that? And secondly, if not, how do we make sure that we can do it?
Just leave the meeting to suspend formal proceedings.
Right. Well, first of all, is there any objection to it? If not, I'll seek leave of the meeting to suspend formal procedures. Is leave granted? All those in favour? Thank you. All right. The other which has been meeting in my mind before we begin this conversation is how are we going to harvest the wisdom that we're no doubt emerge from this discussion and package it up in a way that is useful for Council. Yeah, because it's not going to be any good if we just have so and so said such and such and so and so said the opposite, that sort of thing. So I've had a couple of preliminary conversations, and the suggestion is that as best we can, we'll just try and get down the points. And if we can get down the points, then I'm happy to set aside some time tomorrow to try and synthesize those things into a crisp report that goes to Council. Now, there's 2 tracks here. The first is the ability to do that rests on our ability to form a common view on the matters under discussion. Yeah, that should be easy enough. I suspect I'm the biggest problem, but I'll do my best, is, but if there are points of disagreement, council needs to, that needs to go to council, I think, for council to be aware of, yeah? So as we progress through this, I'll be asking you continuously, are we all agreed on these points, yeah? So the second thing is that to the extent that it's possible, I think that and I'd particularly welcome comments from elected members on this. I think perhaps the most valuable thing that we can provide is not just the detail, but a sense of the strategy and whether we think the strategy's sound, and where we think the strategy might improve. I've got views on it, you've all got views. Yeah. So I'll keep trying to come back to how that informs what we think of the strategy as well. Yeah. So we're happy with one. If so, what if we begin? And bring by I'd suggest that we just work through the board paper, the committee paper to begin with. And I think that will cover many of the issues that follow. And so the idea is not to have the same discussion twice. Yeah. I've forgotten. I've got to bring my charger for this bloody computer. Is there any way? Yeah, it's not just going to run out of battery, I think. No, I just remember this, don't we? Okay, who wants to begin? We've got the executive summary.
I've got a hard copy if you're running.
No, I've not made some things, isn't it? Yeah. Why don't we just wait till I run out of power? Everyone will probably be pretty happy about that. Okay, thank you. I'll take advantage of it. One of the things, let me just reiterate that the reports have not made to come up much further on. And hoping we can capture them systematically. So maybe to set the ball rolling, I could say, we talked about budget is presented an operating surplus of 3.32 million, sets the conditions to deliver surpluses going forward. Well, just to foreshadow, and I've mentioned this to the Chief Executive, we've got a page of financial ratios that come up much later in the report. I would have thought for this council it would be worth looking at projected number of years for the retiring the debt as a ratio. So in other words, 3.32 divided by the debt comes to something like 26 years, because this is an intergenerational issue. The council needs to ask itself how much debt it is going to leave, not just the council that fires it, but the next generation. Now, in saying that, I know it's unjust because you've inherited the debt. Yeah? But the fact is that, from my point of view, this is a good budget on most levels, but I think it suffers from the absence of a debt retirement policy strategy. So this isn't the place to invent one of those. So all I'm proposing is that we put add a ratio when we get to that page later on. That's is what I said. Andrew?
Yeah, I took the view in reading the budget that I did take it in pure isolation because there's, as you say, I think the budget in itself reads good news. My comment and my waiting interest for the long-term financial plan to come through, I think in June, to outline the debt strategy and particularly whether the measures within this budget are sustainable in the long term. So took that view when I was reading through, that this probably answers the immediate issue, but not some of those long-term issues that you just raised.
Yeah,
But it is a missing gap that you are reading in isolation just for the company and not what it means beyond that.
so what I'm
Which
suggesting
needs to be
is
considered.
adding that ratio as a first step. Because not, ratios are accounting standards, we don't have to stick to that.
I guess my thoughts around just on the summaries is that achieving the budget surplus has certainly been step one, with debt retirement sort of step two. So I guess in reviewing this, that's definitely been the focus of where we're moving, and I think it's great that we've achieved that already in a sense. And that discussions around debt are certainly definitely required, but potentially we have to get through this idea of a surplus first and then move on to what the debt strategy is. So I appreciate that the level of debt's not discussed or the strategy is not discussed in this summary, but I think what we're trying to do is, well, I think what this report is trying to do is focus on that first component, which is addressing that surplus.
So where do we go?
I see some benefit in looking at the budget in its current format and then perhaps highlighting some of the things we might be looking for in the long-term financial plan when it comes back to us in the very near future. Because I do see, and there's a number of other aspects that, I want to see whether cost savings are sustainable, whether there is a strategy around cost minimisation in the long term, what the debt covering strategy is, but I see that as issues that we probably want to address in the long-term financial plan. As I say, my preliminary reading of the budget is it ticks, looking at the higher level, it ticks most of the boxes. It's got a surplus, the debt's still under the ceiling as well as under the net financial liability of 100%. The asset ratios are all in the right area, assuming the council can deliver on that. So there's a number of things I think immediately they have done. It's looking, I agree with you, it probably should be a separate resolution once we've gone through the budget as to, based on what we've seen here, what we might be looking for in the long-term financial plan when it comes back. And that gets back to some of your asset stuff that you've raised in the past, probably is part of that resolution as well.
Yeah, I guess the only disagreement, Andrew, between your comments and mine is that I think the debt thing is so serious that I think you don't want to be pushing it off to the long-term financial planning the whole time. People should be seeing it every day that are working on these things.
The only reason I'm saying that is certainly the report and other things management's told us that the long-term financial plan is imminent once the budget's done. So if management was telling me long-term financial plans probably 6 or 12 months away, I'd probably have a different point of view.
Okay, I guess I can live with that. So long as that ratio is in the long-term financial plan, we know how many years it takes to pay off the debt with business as usual. Yeah, because one generation is far too long, far too long.
Yeah. I might just add to that through you, Chair. I was just conscious of not speaking first. From an administration point of view, we've clearly got a staged approach to this. The first and most critical stage for us was just to get to an operating surplus as quickly as possible. That's what you see before you in the budget papers. It's acknowledged that the debt still remains there and redeemed a distinct debt strategy. So the committee might consider requesting that management, as part of the budget considerations, form up a formal debt strategy sometime in the near future to address that. I think the path to debt reduction, there are multiple paths again, which we will need to work through with our elected members in terms of which path you want to take. I certainly know you, through you, Chair, that you've got some views around that in terms of the balance sheet repair, but there's different parts, but that might be something that the committee wishes to consider for the council, that it's not just about this budget, but actually coming up with a formal debt strategy at some point in the near future. I can also say that as we're working through our long-term financial plan, we've framed up this operating budget very much with a view to surpluses for the next decade, subject to it being supported by the chamber. So it hasn't been developed with a 1 year lens, it's actually been developed with that 10-year lens. And some elected members may recall we modelled out what different scenarios over a 10-year period look like. And the scenario that we put together for the council's consideration sees us back in surplus for not just this year, but for the remaining 10 years in the long-term financial plan.
Well, that surplus is what I used to calculate my 26 years. So Paula,
Yes.
first to Paula.
Sorry, yes, okay, thank you. Through the chair, I think just following from the discussion that you've just had, I feel like somewhere between Tim and Andrew's perspective is where I land, because I'm uncomfortable about potential drift. I appreciate where you're coming from and what you're trying to achieve, but I'm just wondering whether we need a little bit more scaffolding around this in the shorter term. Yeah, just a little bit of disquiet, bit of discomfort around the approach.
Okay. Is there anything specific that you wanted to address on the debt front?
Not specifically to that, but more around the focus on moving to surplus, and then we'll start sort of building it in a way that's, you know, more referable to ratios, etc. I'm just feeling like we wait for the long-term financial plan to address that, and that takes a while. We're drifting a bit. I guess it's a bit of, I've got a bit of your discomfort, but I also understand what Andrew's saying and going, yeah, that would be an appropriate way of addressing it, but somewhere in between would be good if there's some middle path.
Okay. Thanks. I'm just working through this document as we go. Is there anything? I'm actually up to the business part now of the draft 2024-25 budget, but is there anything you want to say about any of the content before we get to page 10?
Just, Chair, just with regards to that summary again, and the comment around the debt, at the moment, the summary just has a bullet point there around forecast borrowings and a statement of the number. Is there potentially something that could be written around that bullet to say it's trending, you know, that's still on its way up from the previous year, but how do we put something in there that demonstrates that that is being considered with regards to the summary? Because at the moment it's just a statement and a number.
Yeah, well, picking up on Andrew's point, my suggestion to you is going to be that when there's this advice that goes to council, let's make it very plain that we are looking for a credible long-term debt management strategy in the long-term financial plan. And if whether that would be unjust from an intergenerational point of view. So that's sort of meeting halfway, I think. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I was just going to make the point, if I can. I know you mentioned 26 years or something based on that $3.32 million surplus, but that's bearing in mind that surplus is conditional on the elected members comfortable with increasing the rates CPI plus 2% and also removing the CWMS rebate. So that's basically $4.5 million in round figures. So you take that away and all of a sudden you find yourself back into a deficit. So just want to sort of make that point that that's 3.32 is not in stone as yet, because those things could well be subject for debate down the track amongst the chamber.
I agree with that, and not being in stone, because apart from anything else, from a cash point of view, rather than an accrual point of view, I don't think there's a hope in hell of all the capital money being spent. You're going to be sitting here looking at a big carryover yet again this time next year. That's just not credible. So there's another source of trying to make it look better.
So while you're on that topic, it does get back to the summary and the debt level. And I apologise, I haven't put management on notice of this one, but can you just give an explanation of the carry forwards and how they've been treated? Because my understanding on page 18, it says that you haven't included any carry forwards in the figures, and they'll be up to council to discuss whether they are. And if that is the case, is there any debt associated with those carry forwards that aren't included in the budget figures in front of us?
So thank you for your question, Andrew. So through the chair, yes, carry forwards will be taken to council separately. They'll come to the Audit and Risk Committee first at the beginning of September for review and for approval by council. However, we have been reporting through our budget reviews what the likely carry forwards look like they will be, and the cash impact of that has been included in the debt forecast for 30 June 25.
Hoping to hear that rather than that will have to be added to the additional debt that's in here. Thank you.
But Jade, I assume beyond that, that the strategy assumes that all of the money is going to be spent in 24-25, so that there won't be a need for a carryover into 25-26, and that's what I'm expressing some scepticism about.
In our financial modelling, we have assumed a level of carry forward from 24-25 into 25-26, but then in our long-term financial plan as it currently stands, we're assuming that it's caught up. We obviously need to review that and what the level of carry forwards are year on year.
Just point out for the benefit of members of the committee, you know, this is it's routine in state governments around Australia not to allow any carry forwards. They simply say to the officials, well, if it wasn't important enough for you to get the money spent in the year for which we've allocated it, then it's gone. It's gone to debt retirement. So I don't think it's good practice to just assume that because you had it in the budget and you didn't spend it, that you will get it the next year. And I'd quite like to point that out to council for my part. Any objection?
I don't know of a council that doesn't have a degree of carry forwards, particularly in the current market conditions where it's difficult to get suppliers. But I do take your view that, yeah, if you haven't done it, is it still important and a priority as it was when you first put it in?
Well, with your agreement, I might just put a comment, because I'll circulate whatever I write. I might put a comment in about carry forwards. Because it doesn't matter yes or no, you can always just cut them back. A good thing to do would be to say to the asset managers, we'll get 50% of your carry forward. Get on with it.
I think, Chair, I take your point about the state government practices. The only caveat I put over that is where we actually get state government funding in the final couple of months of the year. So we get some funding sometime from time to time in May or June, because that's the way for governments to also land their budgets. It's very unrealistic that we'll deliver that within that shortened time frame.
Yeah, but is that money that you know you're going to get, or is it money that state government hasn't got around to spend? See, that's the very reason it's offered, is because the agency doesn't want to have to apply for a carry forward.
Correct.
Right? So it wants to say it's promised it to the city of Onkaparinga.
Correct. And that's where we don't have the option. It's not going to deliver the project, but we would take that money and we would deliver it over, the subsequent financial year for the benefit of the community.
Yeah, but in the end, it's a benefit for you.
Yes.
And it creates state governments recalcitrance around carry forward, which to the benefit of the city of Onkaparinga, but it messes up your books. That's right.
helps greatly with cash flow, I would imagine, because the fact that you're not doing dealings, you're not borrowing money, which helps with the underlying result, ultimately.
Push your interest expense down. Absolutely. Okay, I'll put something in about recognising, what we say, the unpredictable.
Also, the rules that we're doing it, Mr. Chair, is the quantum of potential carry forwards is almost as much as the capital budget itself.
Yeah.
So it is material in that aspect.
So it is. Imagine what would happen if it was applied to debt retirement. You could all go out in the orange. Okay, so as I said, that I'm up to, I've jumped ahead a little, but I'm up to page 10, where the draft budget, and we've got this table, which is a very helpful table of opportunity. Is there, I've got a couple of comments on this. Has anybody else got comments?
I suppose more broadly speaking, looking at the budget and how it's changed from 8 years of deficit into a positive result, seem to, in my opinion, hinge on about 3 different issues. One is obviously 2% above CPI increase to boost income. 2 is around the salaries and some management of that, that's delivering some savings. And then the depreciation, particularly on stormwater, is doing the bulk of the heavy lifting. I understand the issues around the revenue opportunities, and certainly I think even SCOSA raised that in their report that the council needs to look at what they're raising compared to what they're trying to deliver. And there's a good summary of relatively low rate increases starting to catch up. I understand the depreciation issue. Just with the staffing issue, obviously, I'm not sure what the impact on service delivery and other issues might be in relation to what's envisaged with the savings. I'm not necessarily against it. I just don't know what the impact might be on service delivery and delivery of the capital budget.
To try and capture this, Andrew, can I suggest we just work through this line by line, because if we jump forward to capital, there's a risk we're going to miss out. Yeah? But how do you come back to it? So, when you increase management of employee costs, I've got a simple question, is I'm willing to find $5 million worth of efficiencies, including plus the budget to go up by about $3.5 million. Does that mean that they were originally budgeted to go up by $8.5 million?
So through the chair, we had $2.5 million in the budget for 23-24, and that's been carried over. So it's an additional $2.5 million, which means that the increase without that, that we would have gone up to, we've gone up by a further $2.5 million.
Okay, so the $2.5 million is for this year.
It's the additional for this year.
Yeah, but
correct.
But, so you can't really roll in last year, except to say we've delivered it.
Correct. We've delivered it and we're committed to delivering it again.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I can just add to that, Chair, in terms of the employee costs, we've got some early wins already. So we've moved from 5 directors to 4. We've also removed support for that director role in this upcoming budget. So that saved us some dollars. We've also built in some assumptions in terms of our negotiation outcomes through the enterprise agreement. Obviously, that's not confirmed until those negotiations are concluded. Those early negotiations are below CPI, and hence why you're seeing some built-in productivity targets for management. Subject to what those outcomes of the enterprise agreement are, it may mean that management's got to put some more down pressure on the employee costs, which is what we're committing to. It's one of the things that elected members raised with me about productivity and efficiency of the workforce. And so that's why we've built in there, not just about revenue raising, but also on the cost side, some downward pressure on costs. Employee costs with budget increased by 4.25%. 0.5 is already a statutory obligation in terms of superannuation. So most organisations will naturally incur that. So you can see their employee costs contained to below CPI in terms of what we've built into the budget, which won't happen by itself. It'll actually require a bit of effort from the administration to achieve that, but we're committed to doing it.
Does the administration keep headcount numbers?
Yes, it does.
So in reviewing this budget to support this figure that we've got here, this council receive the headcount numbers that are implied on this budget?
I think there's an inquiry about headcount numbers that we've been received. My approach through the chair is really if we start looking at individual line by line, we'll go into some really minutiae detail. If you look at the budget as a whole, controllable costs, which is what I'm saying is within control of management, that excludes, for example, depreciation and finance interest costs, because that's largely built into the system, is contained to 4%, which is below CPI. So that's the overarching narrative to apply that downward pressure. And then there'll be different strategies within that to try to deliver on it. But if we try to break it down into individual line by line, then it's going to be quite a bit of a process, because, for example, some organisations focus purely on being downward pressure on employee costs, but we can actually engage agencies then, and that actually costs us more. So for me, the right answer is not about how, what the resource and what the model is. It's actually depending on what you're trying to solve. Sometimes it's employees, sometimes it's contractors, sometimes consultants. Depends on what it is that we're trying to actually deliver. And so I've tried to put that downward pressure in terms of that global figure. And within that, there's going to have to be strategies to deliver on it. So,
I agree with that. You either manage by the money or you manage by the headcount. It's just that the headcount can provide some credibility with a dollar amount. That's all. Yeah, but you don't do both. I'm happy with that. Anything else on that table? Is capitalisation of interest, presumably that's interest that could have been capitalised in the first place?
Through the chair, yes, that is interest associated with borrowings for capital projects. That could be that could be part of the asset costs.
But it could have been capitalised in the first place?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody got anything else on the table? What's the table to go through today?
It certainly gave me the confidence that the council has looked broadly across its organisation to find both revenue opportunities and cost reductions. So that was on a positive note. Good to see, and certainly like to see that continue.
Good. Yeah, some efforts. Good. Okay, that brings us to these other initiatives, the most important of which is obviously the rate revenue increase. Is there any questions on that? I have one. That's the delta between the 6.8 and the 7.9. I've got my numbers wrong. But the way we work backwards implies that we're going to have 700 extra houses.
So through the chair, the 6.8 and the 7.9 from last year are excluding growth. So growth is the new properties, but the 0.8% represents 700 new properties, and that's the growth figure that we've got. However, when we're talking about the rate increase and we're talking about 6.8%, that's not including growth. So that's just separate to that calculation.
Yeah, I get that, but the difference between the 6.8 and the 7.9
is 1.1%, but that's not counted in houses. That's not counted as a growth figure.
So what's it attributed?
Through the chair, the 7.9 was the rates decision last year, and it was 7.9 because CPI at the time was 7.9 last year. So 6.8 is the only decision that's been put forward this year. That's more just comparison year on year. What was the rate decision last year compared to this year?
Yeah, but in the later table, we've got 8.42 was the rate revenue increase. I assume that that's the one that's got those growth in it.
So if you're referring to the table on page 13, so the 8.42 includes 6.8% increase on the general rate.
Yeah.
0.8%, which is the growth, and also an increase in CWMS, which is related to the removal of the CWMS rebate.
Okay, so how many houses in the 0.8?
It would be probably around 700 to 750.
And so we'll check with the planning department that we're actually going to have 700 new houses.
So we get valuation, we get property information from Valuer General on a weekly basis, and they record all of the new properties as they go through doing their reviews. So we get that information quite regularly, that we're able to track whether we're on target for that or not.
Okay, good.
On the rates, so surely the council wants us to have a view on what they're proposing for an increase. Ultimately it's a political decision rather than one that we can potentially provide. But I think the fact that if they don't increase the rates by the amount indicated, which is probably modest, so we'll have to look at what service reduction they might have to take into account to get back to a balanced budget.
That's an excellent point. So in the advice that we prepare for council, will we be saying that we support the 6.8% increase?
That's probably up to the committee, but certainly I think we support an increase above CPI to achieve a balanced budget.
I'm happy to support 6.8. I'd probably support more. But I think council is, as I say, it's entitled, it's a sensitive issue, and council is entitled to know what the ARC thinks of it.
I agree. Something similar occurred with Salisbury last year, and indeed this year, where we made a comment that if they weren't going to increase to a certain extent, then they would need to look at service reduction. So we didn't just let it go by. We made it very clear that you couldn't not increase and not reduce services from a sustainability perspective. And that was in the recommendation.
Can I suggest this, thanks, Paul. Can I suggest this for the committee's consideration? Is that in the advice we say that the committee supports the 6.8%, and in providing that notes the advice that this will allow future rate revenue increases to be aligned to just the CPI.
I was thinking sort of along what Andrew was saying, is that if the council doesn't accept the 6.8%, with an explanation about what the consequences would be, potentially a reduction in services or an increase in debt. And we saw that later in the paper here, where you've got, well, actually talks about it here on page 12, where there was 2 or 3 years there where there wasn't the increases in rates that that was recommended for one reason or another. Not here to criticise what the decisions not to do that, but the trouble was with that, it didn't seem to be, and I might be wrong here, but it didn't seem to be a lot of focus on either reduction in services or reduction in the services that we're providing. It really just basically went with the debt increase, so we didn't actually look to focus on the expenditure, even though the revenue wasn't going to be there. So I think that's a separate thing, but I really think that's an important factor that we've got to, I think, as the community needs to sort of really highlight, is there does need to be that balance between, if the revenue is not coming in, that doesn't mean to say we automatically spend what we said we're going to spend. We naturally need to be responsible and make sure we do provide that balanced budget at the end of the day.
I couldn't agree with you more. If you look at the big picture for the budget, I appreciate all the efforts that have been made to deal with things like employee expenses and so on, but they're still going up at something like CPI. The fact is that the rates are going up at 6.8, the user charges are going up at 25%, and in my judgment, the surplus is coming more from the revenue side than the expense side. So if that doesn't work, then it's council's turn next year to look at the revenue, the expense. The expense side will just have to deliver more. Can't see any other way. So that's why I was proposing for this year to say we support the 6.8, but note that this is intended to allow for future rate increases to be brought in line with the CPI. That's the advice we've received. And that, if we wanted to take up Councillor Yeoman's, and consider that in the event that this doesn't allow rates to be kept at CPI, then further attention will have to be paid to the expenditure side. The committee happy for me to say something like that in that note?
Yeah, obviously can't have it both ways and have rates and high expenditure. So whatever you take off one, you got to add to the other, or vice versa.
Yeah. Okay. So that courier to the library, better watch out. Yeah. Anything else? If there's nothing else on rates, that brings us to the wastewater management system. Is there any comment in that section of the paper? I think this has been dealt with.
Just with that one there, that's probably, from, I suppose, putting the council hat on, but I think that's one that could be a little bit on the political side as well. If you're looking at that recovery model, it's pretty well $1.5 million additional revenue being provided by about 4,500 of the 80,000 ratepayers that we've got, and that in layman's terms equates to that $350 extra on top of the 2%. So I can see some potential community engagement on that one, and some political things around that. But that's why I'm sort of trying to break up the CPI plus 2% on one side of it. But then also this is another factor that's certainly is affecting that surplus figure that has been forecast.
Is this something you want me to capture in this advice, Councillor?
No, it's up to them. Look, it's, at the end of the day, it's up to the committee whether they want to. I'm not sure whether your approach, Chair, is to sort of point by point whether the committee is going to agree or support or not support each initiative, or whether we're just looking at making comments in relation to the whole budget from a,
Well, I was thinking of the latter, if that's all right with the committee. So you make a good point. So I was thinking of restricting the comments, to what we believe to be the main issues, and which are firmly under council control.
Look, from a financial perspective, that initiative makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of going back to the politics and the community perspective. Yeah.
Chair, if I could just probably add to that, just for scale and context. The CWS rebate's equivalent to 1% rates, but the 1% rate is obviously distributed over a larger pool of ratepayers compared to CWS, which is what I think Councillor Yeomans was highlighting, the sort of 4,500 residents. So that's what's built into the budget, but obviously that's a consideration that the Chamber will make in terms of trying to get that balance right for the community.
Okay, thanks. So we're then assisted in this paper by what I found a very helpful table, which provides the analysis of the current budget with the previous year's budget. Everyone, it's on page 14. So everyone here, after this one, Andrew, we'll get to the capital. Yeah. I haven't forgotten about the capital. So, is there anything anyone wants to say on this variation table?
I guess the only point I was keen potentially to get some more detail on is the depreciation in this table increases by 3.2 million. But it's against the original budget of last year. Now we know that last year there was some movements, or this year, I guess, through that depreciation figure. So I guess the $2 million savings that have been made in depreciation don't really stand out in this table as much as they potentially should. I'm not sure if there's any way that administration can provide some more words around that to demonstrate.
So through the chair, so at BR2, as Councillor Pritchard has indicated, we did recognise a $2.3 million increase to our depreciation for 23-24. We've got the BR3 report coming back in May, and we are recognising the $2 million reduction because of the stormwater asset review as part of BR3. So essentially, it ends up with the 23-24 budget only being about $300,000 over what the original budget was forecast to be.
Okay, thank you. There's one comment I had. This, at the risk of being a little gratuitous, but I'll have to make it anyway. Increasing the user charges of $2.2 million. I have some bad personal experience with trying to do that in running a government department. It's easy to put them down in the minutes, but when you receive the deputation from the golfers at the golf course or something like that, these things, the fact that they're there doesn't mean that they're delivered. But I guess that's for the council. Anything else on that table?
I guess just one on the finance charge, the interest rate. Is there a comment around what sort of interest rates have been assumed for this, so that we can cover that going forwards?
So the interest rate that's been assumed is 6.15%, which is our variable CAD rate at the moment. We've kept it as that because the forecasts indicate that there will be a reduction within the next 12 months. The forecasts are not predicting that there'll be another increase. So we've left it at that.
Yeah. Anything else? If not, I'll move on to the capital budget. Why don't I begin by throwing to you, Andrew, as I cut you off before when you're talking about this.
My comments, I think, were reasonably positive that the asset renewal ratio that this works out to be is reasonable. Comment was around the carry forward, which has been answered, only that it is, as a material to what's being proposed for next year, if you add it on top. I don't have any other comment to make in relation to that.
So, anybody else? Joe, can I just ask, the net renewal expenditure, that has the carry forward in it?
Through the chair, no, it doesn't include carry forwards.
So you're actually looking to spend more than that?
Correct.
And how much are you looking to spend?
The net carry forward the gross carry forwards at BR2 were around, I think it was $31 million. The net was about 15 million, roughly.
You mean the portion of it that's attributable to renewal expenditure?
No, sorry, I mean as in the gross expenditure less the less income, and that's for the whole program, renewal and new and significant upgrades.
So on a good day, you're going to spend $57 million.
So including the budget forecasts $51 million in gross expenditure, or $52 million in gross expenditure, plus $31 million carry forward. So it would be an $83 million gross expenditure program for 24-25.
So can I just make sure, because I'm not sure, I'm looking at the net project expenditure of $42 million.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the net renewal expenditure of $34 million. And I'm supposed to, that gives me a number, and then I'm supposed to add $15 million to that.
No, so the way that this table is set out is we've got our renewal section at the top, which is net renewal expenditure of $33.9 million. The second part of that table is showing our new and significant upgrades, and that's a net expenditure for new and significant upgrades of $8 million. So our total capital program is showing as $41.9 million.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Then if you add our carry forward, so our carry forwards for both renewal and new and significant upgrades for next year, or moving from this year into next year, is around it's around the $15 million mark.
Okay, so we got 42 plus 15. Right?
That's net. That's net of income.
Yeah, but let's just say, for the argument's sake, $57 million of expenditure.
Mm-hmm.
Has the council ever come remotely near to spending that amount in its capital budget in its history?
What we should be doing is looking at it from a gross expenditure point of view.
Yeah.
So if we take our gross, so our gross expenditure is showing as so about $52 million for renewal and new for next year, and then $31 million in carry forward, so $83 million.
Okay.
Last financial year was probably the highest that we have spent from a gross expenditure point of view, and that was $60 million.
Right. So in other words, we're saying we can profitably use $20 million on capital, more than we've ever spent before.
And that is why in the budget and in the cash flow forecast, we have assumed a level of carry forward out to 25-26. So when we've been doing our debt projections, we've said, what are we looking to spend as part of the budget? What's going to be brought forward from 23-24? And what could get pushed out into 25-26 as carry forwards, so that we're getting, a realistic picture of what we're likely to spend over that 12 months.
And just remind us again, how much is that assumption about the carry forward into 25-26?
The carry forward, just on a rough assumption, was probably about $15 million gross.
So the same carryover.
No, less, because we're looking at around $31 million gross as at BR2, and then we're saying $15 million. The reason that the carry forward projection into 25-26 was less is because we have a number of significant major projects that have commenced this financial year that have been on hold due to various approvals and things like that have delayed the projects. Once those projects get started, it's unlikely that they will carry forward into 25-26. These are just assumptions from a cash flow perspective, and they'll be refined through our budget review process next year.
Yeah, well, that's a typical issue, isn't it? I mean, from a cash flow perspective, ratepayers are expected to fund these things and fund them in advance through the increase in rates. I mean, it doesn't get spent. There's an equity problem there, I think.
Through the chair, the money might not get spent in that particular year that the rates are raised, but it will get spent in that following year. So we're not re-rating, and that's why in our budget, in our capital budget, we don't show the carry forwards, because we're not rating again for those projects that we've already rated for.
Yeah, but in a sense, it makes the overall financial position look a bit better than it really is, doesn't it? Because you've got money there that was supposed to be spent, but if it hadn't been spent, right, would have been capitalised. Actually, this becomes important, doesn't it? Because there's a shift in emphasis in this budget between the new expenditure and new capex. So
that distinction has always been there.
But if I look at it,
through the chair, there's certainly a different emphasis in this budget around renewal and new. If you look at the renewal figure, you'll see that it's significantly higher this year, in the proposed budget for next year than what it is this year. we'll equally see a reduction on the new side. And that's very much linked to the advice we got from the SCOSA and others, where we're focusing very much on the renewal side as opposed to the new. Having said that, some of the new that was built in last year was obviously from very good advocacy efforts from staff, where we did get funding for projects, but there is certainly now much more of an emphasis on renewal as opposed to the new, and the numbers bear that out.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, wouldn't it be unreasonable for this committee to ask council to review its capital budget in light of the carry forwards and in light of what they're confident of delivering? That wouldn't be an unreasonable comment back to council. While financially, and I do take on board the fact that you're not raising money twice for it, it also is a reputational issue if you're promising to deliver projects in a year and it's taking longer to deliver. Well, there's obviously reasons behind that. You don't want to get to the stage where projects are running multiple years behind or you're carrying large amounts.
I'm happy, if the committee's happy, I'm happy to put a comment in the advice to that effect. Yeah, you know, I mean, people know where I stand on this. So.
And as I mentioned, I think the quantum of the carry forward is a significant portion of the actual capital in the budget. So, you know, management might come back and say, yes, I've got the ability to deliver, or at least foreshadowing, you know, whether that is possible when they look at what they are actually achieving.
I mean, there's the question, isn't it? We can't just assume that the carry forward applies to projects from this year. Some of those projects might have been carried over several years, might be now. And the worth of those projects should be reviewed, I would have thought, each year, rather than just automatically approving carryovers. I mean, something was budgeted for 3 years ago and still hasn't been done. Does someone ask the question to say, well, do we really need to do it?
And that process does occur through the BR4 process where all the carry forwards go up and council get the opportunity to approve like every other BR.
Okay. Do any projects get eliminated? No. Okay. Yeah, let's keep moving. Yeah. So, we've got the next section, which is on borrowings. Have we said enough about borrowings? Yep. And then you've got the next section, which is on the risks. Yeah. Tomorrow, I think the risk that's missing is the one was just discussed. The risk is that the capital program could get even further behind. Rather than spending more than ever. I don't have any problem with the risks that are identified in the table, but with your agreement, I would suggest that we say to council that the risk of the capital program is really high. And the higher it gets, the greater the risk that it might be spent. And it could get behind significantly. I mean, you know, the problems that have contributed to it getting behind haven't gone away. The problems and things like that, you still got to get them. Now, you know, you could argue, I suppose, that by putting more into the asset review bucket and less into the CapEx bucket, you would expect some acceleration of the expenditure. It's a bit thin. So can I put a recommendation in there that risk be added to the risks? I'll say silence is assent across Thomas Morley's head. No? Okay. Opportunity? Yep, we've agreed that. So that brings us to the end of that and takes us to the attachments. Now, it's probably a bad idea to go through the attachments page by page. So, let's just ask. We've got the attachments begin with the important ones, the financial statements. Is there anything anyone would like to raise in respect of any of those? The operating statement, the balance sheet, the cash flow statement.
No, from my view, they just reflect the discussion that we have. That's
right.
Fallen out of it. I've got no questions on it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So we take those statements as read? Yeah. Because if we do, I think that brings us to
Probably the only one I think it's in that same appendix that's worth looking at is probably the ratios.
Yeah, I'm
making some comment on those.
you get to the non-statutory stuff, the key financial indicators. Was there anything on that presentation?
I think certainly from my view that the key financial ratios are probably what this committee would expect them to be, and have achieved the objectives that we would like to see across those ratios. That has achieved a surplus, which we've been looking for. The net financial liabilities is within under the target range. Interest rate coverage is probably what would naturally fall out. Looking through the debt being, say, within both the net financial liability and under the debt ceiling, taking on board your previous comments that we'd like to see an overall debt strategy. But otherwise, I think they actually look positive, and we should reflect them back to council.
Yeah, I concur. Does everybody else agree with that? So the state advice would say that the ratio analysis seems to suggest that the wisdom of the present budget. I'm sorry to do this, Joe. Can I just take you back? Sorry, I missed a query. Back on the draft uniform presentation of finances, which is a good thing to do, a good table. Capital. We've got capital. You remember? I'll let you find it. Yeah? Yep. On capital expenditure, we've got $39 million and renewing replacement of existing assets. And adding back, as we should, with depreciation of 44.7. What's the delta there?
So the delta is part of the reason why we're going through our review of looking at our asset classes and reviewing their useful lives, their unit rates and their depreciation. We know that we have a few asset categories, or a number of asset categories actually, where the depreciation is significantly higher than the renewal spend. So we're reviewing asset class by asset class to determine, are we calculating depreciation correctly? Do we have the right useful lives? Are we calculating unit rates correctly? Or are we not spending enough on renewal for that particular asset class? So that's, we started with sealed roads, which we did last financial year. We've just done stormwater, and we'll be kicking off another asset category soon.
So is that for a shadow that 44 might come down to a lower number?
That would certainly be our hope. We are aware though that on the flip side with some asset categories that it could go up, but we are certainly looking at asset categories that we do believe there is a significant gap between our renewal spend and our depreciation because of our methodologies relating to either valuation or useful lives.
Good, good. Sorry, I'll get back to the correct sequence now, I hope. Okay, so we've got, everyone happy with the comment about it'll be included in ratios? Yeah? And then we've got the financial indicators, which we've been going through. And then we've got the 5 summaries. Can we take those read? Yeah? Unless anyone's got anything particular that they want to raise on that? Because if not, then it gets, I think, am I right, to new and significant upgrades? Yeah. Any comment on that? Okay, so then we've got this presentation of the draft business plan and budget. So I don't even know if it's our place to comment on that, is it? Are we expected to comment on that?
So through the chair, that is actually a separate agenda item.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, okay. Quite right. So can we bring 2.1 to an end? This point? Yeah?
We've got a suggestion.
Yep. Well, it's going to be results of the changes in the zoning, a couple of changes. Looks good to me. Is happy?
Unsuspending independent procedures to move this.
Oh, sorry. To move the motion, we've got to unsuspend procedures. So I suppose I should first of all ask if everyone's prepared to unsuspend procedures. Thank you, Andrew. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor. And having unsuspended, we can go back to this recommendation. So any discussion on the recommendation?
Can I just ask a question? How are we going to deliver that first one? With your report to the council?
How are we going to the Colonnade Taverns after this?
Because it's tomorrow.
Write it all out. No, sorry, but seriously, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draft something and I'll circulate it to all the members of the committee and for their comment.
Yeah.
Right, and hopefully get that done by about lunchtime tomorrow, because I know we're under some time pressure here.
Yeah, I was just thinking how the elected members will have time to review that.
Well,
before
with any luck, I'll have it to our chief executive around lunchtime tomorrow, and I'll leave it to him to circulate, I imagine.
Yeah, the intention would be, since we got it, we circulate to elected members in preparation for consideration of the report of the special counsel. We've also got 4 elected members here at ARC today. So you've heard the conversations firsthand as well. So we'll do our best to try to get that information circulated as broadly as possible. But we appreciate the ARC's chair's efforts to try to do that in a very, very short time frame, which we acknowledge.
Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah.
I'm happy to move the motion in front of us, and in doing so, commend the council and administration of actually addressing the core issue of sustainability and bringing the budget back into a surplus, and look forward on them delivering such, because I know there's certainly been a fair bit of pain, I suspect, from elected members with some of the things that have been done to bring it back, but I think the pain now is going to be a lot better than a lot more pain later if it's not addressed. So I'm more prepared to move the recommendation in front.
Thanks, Andrew, but I think we should capture that and perhaps not in as many words, we'll just say, and the committee commends the council and management on, what do I say? On running a surplus budget.
Yeah, I think, the committee commends the management and elected members on achieving a balanced budget in a short period of time. And I think they'll be rewarded in the short-term pain rather than deferring the inevitable.
I don't know, we'll put all that down. We can't just get down, but we commend the council and the management on achieving the balanced budget in a short period of time. Full stop. Good. All right, so we've got a member, have we got a seconder?
I'm happy to second that.
Thanks, Paul. Those in favour? Okay. So that brings us to agenda item 2.2, I think. Right.
You want to suspend the discussion?
I don't know what we do. It's just really fine. What page is it on?
157.
150, right, yeah. Okay. So, we've got a similar exercise here, inviting the Audit Risk Committee to review the annual business plan. Do we need to suspend whatever it is for this purpose as well, or are we in a position just to discuss it as normal? Can I just ask a question? We've been asked to review it. So at the end of this meeting, we could say, okay, well, we've reviewed it. Is that, are we happy with that? Is that?
I talk it through after reading it through. Obviously, most of this is reflected in our previous discussion and is just putting the numbers into words. I didn't see anything that I necessarily took offence with or would suggest changing. I did like a lot of the summaries that were provided throughout the business plan in the key activities and what wanted to go. I'm not one for trying to find information. It was good that there's a lot of summary through. So I was pretty happy with that. I'll leave the ESCOSA stuff as a separate issue, as in management's recommendation or comments in relation to that. But by and large, I think the business plan reflects what we've just previously discussed.
So the logical consequence of Andrew's view is to say, okay, well, we've reviewed it.
Through the chair, the purpose of the paper talks about reviewing it for consideration and feedback, and the recommendation just simply refers to review. But I wonder whether this is an opportunity to sort of slightly tweak the recommendation and say provides the following feedback, if in fact that's what we want to do, because I think the purpose of the paper sets out what we're meant to be doing. Yeah. It's not necessarily fully captured in the recommendation at the moment.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. The question is, what's the feedback? So is that, I mean,
yeah, good question. Well, some of it has been mentioned by Andrew, yeah. And you've alluded to the ESCOSA thing, so that could also be incorporated in that.
Well,
I'm just suggesting we might look to slightly tweak the recommendation to, in fact, incorporate the contents of the purpose. That's
yeah, and the committee notes that the business plan is some aligns with the budget, which was considered under 2.1. Yeah, so at least it looks like we're doing our job. And I refrain from putting in a dissenting opinion about the ESCOSA response. So, you happy with that? Did you want to say, I don't know, no, we can, did you want to say something about the arrangements for our forthcoming meeting and the procedures and everything, or will it be with it separately?
Close the meeting.
Oh.
Probably just a question, Mr. Chair, why the SCOSA report is attached. I know will be just it's on the agenda for the next meeting. We're just conscious that if by default we're accepting the annual business plan, we're also accepting the management's response to the SCOSA report, given we haven't discussed it.
But when you say it's on the agenda for the next meeting, referring to that, the second meeting that was originally planned for this evening?
No, I reckon I've read something and I'll get management to correct me if I'm wrong. That said it would be on the agenda for the May meeting. I'm sure I read that somewhere.
Okay. For the May ARC meeting.
Through the chair, it was requested at the last ARC meeting that we had a report come and we would provide to the May ARC meeting that specifically addresses the responses. To Andrew's point, the responses that we have included in the annual business plan, there would be an opportunity if the Audit and Risk Committee don't like the way that we've responded to make those changes, because we'll be meeting during the consultation period. So we could then update for the final version of the annual business plan following feedback from that May ARC meeting.
Well, so in what's in front of us here, we could just put the review movement and provide the final feedback to the business plan, blah, 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 and notes that the discussion of the SCOSA, the response to the SCOSA report is scheduled for its next meeting.
That would be my suggestion, to include in the dot point that we're noting that the Audit Risk Committee will discuss the SCOSA report in more detail at the May ARC meeting.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's good. Is somebody like to use that motion? Andrew, thank you.
Happy.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Rowlands, thank you. All those in favour? Okay, so I can declare the meeting ended. Huh? So thank you all, and thanks to the observers for their interest. Thank you all for your participation. I'll declare the meeting closed.